Yo, what's going on? Welcome back to D+Pad Life, and today I want to discuss Resident Evil 7 Biohazard on the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4, as well as the Xbox One, right? Something along those lines. I love how it says I've only played 6 minutes of this game. That's because I popped in the PS5 version to see if it supported VR. It does not. In any case, welcome back to part 15 of the Resident Evil discussion series here on D+Pad Life. In case you're new to the channel or new to the series, we have covered Resident Evils 1, 2, and 3, as well as their remakes, Resident Evil Code Veronica and Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 4 and its remake, Resident Evil Revelations 1 and 2, and Resident Evils 5 and 6. So almost the entire series up to this point. We've still got 7 to go and 8 to go. But after that, it's the wait for Requiem, and I'm really looking forward to that. I've got my eyes on that. I'm pretty sure I'll get to cover the game shortly after its release. If that changes at all, I'll let you guys know on the channel. But if you're a Resident Evil fan and you just enjoy hearing another fan share their thoughts and opinions and time with the game and just sort of gush about this series as a whole, please subscribe to D+Pad Life. This is a great channel for Resident Evil fans. We talk about the series frequently. It is definitely something that can be relied upon with your subscription, so we'd appreciate that. But as far as this series go, I generally just discuss my initial time with the game, my initial impressions, the things I like, the things I dislike, and yeah, just kind of go from there. These are spoiler-free discussion videos, so you don't need to worry about any sort of spoilers coming out in case you haven't played the game already. So sit tight, get comfortable, or dig into whatever task you're up to. This is a companion channel after all. It's intended to be listened to as you're doing other things. So let's go ahead and get into it. Resident Evil 7, this game had a ton of hype when I first got my hands on it. Now, I didn't play this game brand new. I was pretty cautious with Resident Evil 7. I remember seeing the initial trailer and being like, what is this game? This looks really interesting, really sick. Kind of reminded me of PT a little bit, similar energy, similar vibe. And then they announced this is Resident Evil 7. And I was a little taken aback. It was unlike anything I had seen from Resident Evil before. And as gameplay began to become exposed and things were leaked, and information about the game just became more well known, I wasn't exactly a fan of what I was hearing. For me, they seemed to be departing from what Resident Evil really was. We now had this crazy family members, this crazy group of people that were, communicative, and they would be able to speak to you. And at this point, the molded had not really been revealed yet. So it just seemed like, okay, I'm battling this crazy family. And there was a lot of paranormal elements, but the primary thing that was off-putting to me at first was the first-person perspective. Little fun fact about me is I'm not a big first-person gamer. I don't really care for that perspective very much at all. I can do it from time to time, and certainly there are some games that are in first person that I enjoy just fine. But for the most part, shooter games such as like Battlefield, Call of Duty, Apex Legends, things of that nature, they don't call to me one bit. I don't really care for that. And the way I've always explained it to people is people will say first person makes a game feel more immersive. And I actually argue that I feel less immersed playing first person. It's like, who looks at the world like this? You know what I mean? Like that type of stuff. It doesn't work for me. Taking away my peripheral vision and trying to claim that this feels more immersive and more natural just doesn't do it. Now, I understand, in third-person games, it's then you'd argue that it's like an out-of-body experience seeing a character in the third person and navigating that world. How is that immersive? But at the very least, you do have peripheral vision from that perspective. You can see a bit more around you. And it's just a more fun experience for me. But in any case, my initial time with Resident Evil 7 definitely came delayed. It was after, the hype train had flown off the rails, so to speak. People were over the moon. They were talking about how this game brought Resident Evil back to its roots, and it was the most authentic Resident Evil game we had had in a very long time. And fans of Resident Evil were going to go crazy for this game. And a lot of people I knew played it and pretty much agreed with those sentiments. But I was not sold yet. I had seen a lot of stuff about the game like I'd shared already, and I was just like, that's not what I'm seeing though. And then it was announced that they added a VR version. There was VR support. So if you have the Gold Edition for PlayStation 4, it actually supports PlayStation VR. And so I had made up my mind that that was the way I was going to play this game, because I already knew that first-person games just didn't quite do it for me. So I thought, you know what, though? I bet playing it in VR, it would be great. And I didn't necessarily have any experience with VR at that time. I had very, very limited experience. I had messed around with a VR headset at like a mall. And I definitely enjoyed what I played. I definitely thought it was very cool. And I could see the potential there, especially for a horror game. And so for years, I had this game but wasn't playing it. Or, sorry, I did not own it. I wanted this game, but I had not played it. Eventually, I picked the game up and just thought, I got it for a good deal. And I thought, okay, now I have it. So when the time comes for me to pick up a VR headset, I'll be able to dig in, right? But then, 6 months goes by, a year goes by, another 6 months go by. And I think just shy of the 2-year mark, I went ahead and decided, you know what? Enough time has passed. There doesn't seem to be any sort of sign that I'll be getting a VR headset anytime soon. I need to go ahead and boot this game up, take it for a spin, and see what all the fuss is about. So ultimately, I decided, this epic intro, right? Ultimately, I decided it was time to dive in and actually take the game for a spin. And I did, and I played through it, and I beat it just regularly, just like everybody else who had experienced the game. And I don't know, I guess you could argue that maybe people overhyped it, and so they put expectations through the roof, although even I think I sustained a pretty low expectation for the game. Like I said, I hadn't seen a whole lot that made me think I was going to particularly like this one. But I kind of walked away from the game just feeling pretty indifferent, just thinking like, overall, I mean, it's a perfectly serviceable horror game. It's definitely, like a decent first-person game, but I don't know. I don't feel like I just played one of the greatest Resident Evils of all time. I don't feel like I just played a game that returned to its roots. I don't feel like this game is, doing what the originals did. And quite the contrary, to be honest with you. I mean, they certainly brought back, a little bit of backtracking, some puzzle mechanics, inventory management to a degree, for sure. That stuff existed, but it was still pretty darn linear. It was still a heightened, how do I phrase it? I did not feel like I was playing a Resident Evil game. And as someone who's been with the series since the very beginning, as someone who's very familiar with the series, that kind of just went against what everyone said. However, what this game did achieve was something that many other Resident Evils have achieved before it that I thought just felt like a departure. And that was that even though it doesn't feel like a Resident Evil game, it's still a pretty dang good game. It's a fun little game. I feel like it's a little less fun. I feel like it's a little less good. Actually, to me, Resident Evil 7, it just ain't that great. I'm not a fan of the pacing as far as how you progress through stages. I think the level design is fairly weak, in my opinion. That mansion that you start off in, or you could call it a house or whatever, it just never quite feels like I'm exploring a large environment. It kind of feels like it's just a bit more of like trying to get as much as they can out of the limited space they decided to utilize. Like there's an early sequence where you're trying to escape a predator enemy, someone who's chasing you down, and literally the way the level is designed, there's not a way to like loop around. It has a hallway that comes to a dead end. And unless the guy's right on your tail, he just won't follow you down that hallway. And there's a save room in the area too, where as long as you go in there, they won't enter the room to come after you. And so and it's not a very large area. It just seemed like and that's really your introduction to the Predator gameplay and to honestly the general gameplay of Resident Evil 7. And it wasn't impressive to me. It actually felt kind of clunky. It felt poorly executed. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who will disagree with that, but Nah, man, I wasn't impressed by that. And I don't feel like it got necessarily much better. Definitely, like, you end up reaching areas where the level design does circle around. So you can kind of make sense of running and hiding and dodging and things of that nature. But it still doesn't necessarily feel like it's really good. Just kind of a run and hide simulator. And eventually you start getting some firearms and they introduce a more normal enemy that's this game's zombie, so to speak, known as the Molded. And to me, that's when the game got better, for sure. It gets more fun then. Any of the stuff where you're being chased by like an unkillable enemy, it's not fun to me. It's really uninteresting, actually. And honestly, all in all, though, I think the first person perspective really hurts this game. I think for some, yeah, it like adds to the horror and it adds to the experience as a whole as far as immersion and being frightened. But for me, it felt really goofy. The way I've described it is it feels like a haunted house simulator. And what I mean is, like, when you're on those carnival rides or you go to a haunted house with your friends and out of nowhere, the spooky person jumps from the dark and they're just like, "Ooh, aren't you scared of me?" And then they just kind of go back and skitter away. The skittering away is you having control of your character to run away, right? And then you get enough distance or you get into a spot long enough that you just see them turn around and walk away. But this whole idea of, like, in cutscenes where they're getting in your face and talking to you and the screen turns red because they're hurting you, it's never scary. I mean, it's just like, hey, you know, we got you now, boy. And it's like, okay, not scary, kind of stupid, kind of goofy, really doesn't feel like Resident Evil one bit. In my opinion, the first person perspective actually really hurt this series. I don't think it helped it at all. I don't think it helped take Resident Evil to the next level or return it to its roots or anything like that. I think the remakes of 2, 3, and 4 really show that first person does not help it go back to its roots. Those games feel more like authentic Resident Evil games, way more than 7 or 8 do. And, you know, then there's the Baker family, which is like, they were all over the promotions of the stuff. It's not really spoilers to discuss them. I didn't find them scary. I didn't find them intimidating, really. I mean, they might shock you. They might surprise you. They might get a jump scare out of you. But for me, that was about it. Just unimpressed by it for the most part. What I do appreciate, though, about the game is the general atmosphere, the general energy is good as a game, not as a Resident Evil game per se, although I do think this could work, like this sort of setting and even this sort of tale could work. But the fact that they decided to utilize an abstract idea such as the Molded to introduce almost paranormal elements to this series or telepathic elements and things of that nature, to me, it just seemed like y'all had run out of ideas on what to do with, you know, biological weapons and things that scientists would invent. And we're like, well, we really want to do more abstract horror. We want paranormal stuff in here. What's the way we can get around it? A disease that affects the mind or something along those lines. And I don't know. It's not for me. I almost wish they had just started a brand new horror franchise based on this idea. And I honestly think it would have been getting a ton of praise for me, actually. I would still not be a huge fan of first person. I would still think it could have been better. But if it didn't have Resident Evil attached to it, I feel like that really creates a ton of baggage for this game, if I'm being completely honest, that this game doesn't necessarily need or deserve. I think it strives and survives just fine without the Resident Evil name. I think overall, it's still a memorable game and it's really cool. It would have been interesting if they just named it, if it was a new series and they just named it Biohazard in America and named it Resident Evil in Japan or something along those lines. Now, obviously, that's not a great idea for branding. That would have confused people, but it's just an idea, you know what I mean? Because this game really is a biohazard once you start to learn the nature of its story. But overall, yeah, just not a whole lot of praise for Resident Evil 7. Certainly it's beautiful. Certainly it is an interesting story. It definitely has something to offer. I do understand why people like it. But as far as like its place in the overall series, man, Resident Evil 7 is one of my absolute least favorites. I think it's one of the worst, actually, as far as these games go. And that's just how I feel about it. You know what I mean? Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I can understand why people do love it. But for me, just not that great. What I will say though is Resident Evil 7 in VR is an absolute blast. If you ever get the chance to play it, you absolutely should. And I cover a lot of VR content on this channel, and I feel like this is a great channel to be a part of in case you're ever wondering if you should get a headset or not, because they are pretty affordable and cheap these days. And being able to play Resident Evil 7 in VR is a huge reason to have one for sure. This game is absolutely a blast in VR. I have way more fun with it in VR than I do playing it traditionally. So that is something I can recommend. But overall, yeah, those are my thoughts on Resident Evil 7. I don't have a ton of like a long list of positives. Mostly for this one, it is gripes. It is dissatisfaction. It is disappointment. It is concerns on like, well, what are we going to do next? Where is this series going? And well, in 2026, we already know, and that is Village, Resident Evil. No, I'm joking. It's Resident Evil 8 Village. Yeah, you know, where Chris is apparently part werewolf or something. Anyways, next up is Resident Evil 8. And yeah, you definitely aren't going to want to miss that video. If you enjoyed this conversation today, please give the video a like. It goes a long way in supporting the channel and helping it grow. I always appreciate seeing that like counter go up. It lets me know that you guys are engaged in the content, that you appreciate the content, and that, you know, you want to see D+Pad Life succeed. So I really appreciate you guys for doing that, as well as consider subscribing to the channel, man. It's a really fun channel. I upload multiple times a week. And it's all about engaging in all sorts of topics in gaming and different video games themselves. And also it's got a strong backlog focus on defeating the backlog so that we can all achieve that together. And let me know down below what you thought of 7. I'm pretty sure it's going to be most people saying that they loved it. I'd love to hear what about 7 in particular makes you love it as much as you do. What was your favorite piece of it? Or if you're with me and you found it disappointing or a letdown, what was the glaring part of 7 that took away from your experience the most? I'd love to hear your guys' answers to that. So please comment down below and let's get a conversation started. But yeah, next up is part 16 of the Resident Evil discussion series, and it is our final stop until Requiem. Pretty excited to get this going, to get this taken care of, because now the channel can, this has been a long series, you know, it's 16 videos. We'll be able to move on and get on to the next thing. I got a bunch of ideas of things I'd love to talk about, especially what's going on in 2026 as far as gaming goes. There's a lot of excitement here at D+Pad Life. So I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching and take care.